Recognition, power, and influence is your birthright, and this podcast shows you how to get there. Welcome to episode number 235. Today's episode is amazing. I'm interviewing Shari Begun. Shari and I have been working together for the past 3 years, and really more officially prior to that, because Shari was a student in Platinum Exchange, which was the women's leadership organization that I was a coach and a part of back in the day before I started my own business. And she was a student before I even came into that organization. But that is actually serendipitously how our paths crossed later on. And then last night, I had the pleasure of celebrating Shari as one of the 2024 Silicon Valley Women of Influence Award recipients. I attended the ceremony that they had in Santa Clara, and at the time of recording this interview, she hadn't received this award yet. And I thought this is absolutely perfect timing where I get to celebrate Shari once again through this fantastic interview, but also because she has so much wisdom and knowledge to share, and she is truly a person who celebrates and supports empowering other people to step into their higher level leadership potential. As a woman who grew up in a male-dominated environment, she had to navigate her own career journey, and she's such a perfect example of that person who gets into that position of power and influence and now is able to give back and support so many other women as part of that process. You're going to absolutely love today's interview, so let's just get started. Welcome to Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and I teach you how to get promoted, get paid, and bring your whole self to the leadership table. I am on a mission to change organizations from the C-suite out, because women are the new face of leadership, and we are doing it on our terms. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and super excited, as always, to be here with you again this week. This week, I have a very, very, very very special guest with me. And I always think my clients are special, but more recently, I had the opportunity to nominate one of my clients for the Silicon Valley Women of Influence Award. And as I was working on this nomination, I had to answer a series of questions. And actually, part of the introduction that I'm about to give for Shari is something that I wrote as part of that nomination. And I was writing this and really reflecting on her career and the impact that she personally is making on the leadership table. I was like, wait, Shari, you need to be on my podcast. This is part of your story. This is part of your journey. And you have so many women are going to benefit from that. So not to set her up too big, but she really is that big. And I'm personally very inspired by her. And I've also, we have another woman inside of the leadership table right now who actually learned everything that she learned from her leadership from Shari. So we get to see Shari mentoring down and just like really the direct impact that she's having on the leadership table. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much, Shari, for being here today.
Thank you, Stacy. I'm super excited to do this.
So let me give a formal introduction of you and then we'll just dive right in. So Shari Begun is Vice President of Worldwide IoT Sales. She champions growth and innovation as a global sales leader by blending ambition and drive with a commitment to empowering women in STEM and sales. Her decisive actions and advocacy are creating a more inclusive future, proving determination and inclusivity can redefine success in traditionally male-dominated fields. That gave me goosebumps to read. I'm so impressed. So let's start out with some of your secrets to success. How would you define your success in your career?
Yeah, Stacy, I think there's kind of 3 themes that's helped me in my careers. One, I've always been curious and I'm a lifelong learner. You know, as a kid, I would pull out the encyclopedia. Now I go to Wikipedia or find a podcast on it. 2, I'm able to relate to all different types of people and really figure out what makes them tick. And then lastly, I'm able to see things, call it strategic, before they actually happen. And I'll give you an example of that making people tick. It was in 2011, I had started a role as a regional sales manager at a brand new company. It was day one. I'd met with the HR director and she showed me the org chart. She points to somebody on the org chart and she goes, you know, this person has a lot of talent, but I don't think they're going to work out. And obviously I filed that information away and I spent, the first couple weeks traveling with my team, getting to know them. And then, I've been there a month or two and I'm kind of shaking my head because I've traveled with this person and they're super talented. The customers love them. And I couldn't really figure it out what was going on. But anytime I was in staff meetings, people just had a very about this person. Well, then it dawned on me after a while, after they'd come back from meetings, this was a woman in a very male-dominated office. She'd come back and she'd be super excited and she would tell you about meetings and it would literally be stream of consciousness. It'd be very hard to follow, but because I saw this person's talent, I'd whiteboard stuff because that's how my brain works. I was trying to understand it. We're in the office, I'm whiteboarding it out. And then I'm kind of understanding, I'm like, wow, she's brilliant. We have a great opportunity at this customer. So then I didn't really point it out to her. I just showed her how to do this. And I said, now you're going to need support. Why don't you maybe frame it, this way? And so she started just modeling some of my behavior, but still being herself. And all of a sudden she's building credibility with people. Well, fast forward with my help, but it was really her. She closed one of the biggest deals in the office. Well, there's nothing that gets you more credibility than closing a big deal and say, I think it was close to $10 million deal. So anyways, I didn't give up on her. Well, now this person runs a huge team at one of the competitors and is doing phenomenal. And, it just was a matter of I saw something that nobody else in the company saw. I took the time to spend with her. And she's now flourishing in her career. She was still able to be herself, just make some small tweaks to how she was communicating.
You know what I love about that story, and I'd love to hear your opinion about her future success, is that, so the part that seems obvious is the $10 million sales creates credibility. And I've seen this over and over again where a woman in a male-dominated field has a huge win like this and still doesn't lead to success. And what ends up happening is that, like what you were talking about, is shifting her communication at the same time allowed her and allowed other people to see that success was probably on her versus this sort of subtle thing that we do where women have success and then we think it's a fluke because it's like, well, that worked out for her. And so I think there's this really important balance between shifting kind of both at the same time. So still going for that big win, still having that huge accomplishment, but then learning along the way how to own it, how to communicate, how, like you said, how to whiteboard your own thoughts so that you can communicate it well. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think the other thing is on the leader also. I make a point to have my team do the work and be showcased. I could have went and met with some of those stakeholders in the company and gotten her all the help she needed. Well, A, that's not scalable, but B, it was her work. She was the one doing it. So people saw you can't just, memorize that or just create that. They see what this person has. So I think I've done a really nice job of that in my career of kind of putting my team at the forefront in it. So I think that's another thing that helped, that situation where I could have just jumped in and done it for her.
So do you have to get to a certain place in your career where you're willing to put your team in the forefront? Because what I was actually thinking about is this Achilles heel that women have where we put our team in the forefront and then our team starts, having way more success than us. What is the balance that you've been able to play there?
Well, Stacy, that's been one I've struggled with. And I actually think at that company, it slowed me down. Ultimately ended up leaving to get the job I wanted on it. But, if I look back at what some of my personal values are and everything, it was still the right thing to do. Now I think maybe some of the language you heard I said was her idea, but under my leadership, helped her tweak. I've learned to say different things to show how I contributed to that success, how I orchestrated, found that raw talent, that kind of thing. So I guess I've worked a little bit on how I sell myself too.
Right. And do you feel like it's compromised your values along the way?
Not at all, because it's true,
Yeah.
I mean, I've rolled up my sleeves and worked hard also, and, spent nights thinking about, wow, how do I get through to this person? What's important to them? And there's a lot of work that goes along with that. But as a leader, that's one of our biggest roles, is bringing out the best in our team and bringing up everything in the company.
Yeah. And I feel like this idea of curiosity, I'd love to hear more about what that specifically means, because I meet a lot of women who are lifelong learners, but are still feeling incredibly stuck in their career. And I think you can be a lifelong learner and still not actually be showing up curious in conversation. So I do think that they're like connected. And then also it's important to kind of define what curiosity means and how it has helped you have success.
Yeah. So a lot of, I would say, probably a lot even before I started working with you. I mean, it's been some recent changes, is because I wanted that credibility. I'd always start meetings with just getting straight to the point, talking about business, and sure, everybody could see I knew what I was talking about, and I actually got feedback. Wow, you really know your stuff. And on it. So now I try and ask a lot of questions of people, to maybe a peer fine who runs a business unit. What's worrying you right now? What are some of the biggest challenges you have on your team? How can my team help your team? And just simple questions before getting right into the meat of the meeting. We're all busy. We want to get what we want and move forward, of just asking maybe better questions.
I love that. I think the root of curiosity is in questions. I think that's part of, if you want to define or understand curiosity, it's asking powerful questions. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, did asking questions versus just starting the meeting and, being this person who really knows her stuff, do you feel like asking questions even elevated that a little bit, so it made your credibility even more credible? Or was there like really no difference?
Absolutely, because I think the reason why is they can tell that I care about their business and the whole company as a whole, not just, oh, Shari just wants her team to make a sale and she doesn't care what it means to the company, that I have other projects I'm working on and stuff. So absolutely, I think people see that you're back to that thinking strategic and what's important, and who doesn't like people to care about them, just more
right.
Level.
Exactly. And I think that there's a very powerful difference between asking questions in this way of curiosity and connection versus I don't know the answer. And so as long as it's coming from this place of like really wanting to learn more about them or their team, asking questions in my experience has led to much more credibility. And, if you're listening to this and kind of start to play this game with yourself and other people, when they come into a meeting and they just sort of tell you all the things that they've learned, do you have, well, let's just say like respect even? That's part of credibility. Do you have more respect for them? Do you want to come to them? Or do you feel like the person who's able to ask some good, powerful questions in the meeting is somebody that you want to engage with more? And just kind of play around with that for yourself.
Even if you know this person well, you work with this team a lot. I mean, I'm in high tech. Things change really quickly. So it's okay to say, last time we talked, you said ABC, but I wanted to see, has anything changed? So once again, you're showing some credibility, but you're also 9 times out of 10, something has changed, even if it's been 4 weeks, just because of the pace my industry runs.
Exactly. That's just very important. It seems like much more like on it, so to speak, right? Much more engaged. So I know we worked on a myriad of things in coaching, and one of the things that I always appreciate about you and also most of my clients is that they come to coaching, generally speaking, from a corporate badass place. You've had an enormous amount of success in your career, and you've also had a ridiculous amount of mentors and coaching communities. This is not something that you had never tried out before. But I'm curious, just in the last couple of years, has there been anything that has really surprised you? Like as we have worked on your communication, on your allyship, on advocating for yourself, any surprises along the way?
Probably the biggest is how I manage my energy. Stacy, you also get me to think very differently than maybe other coaches I've worked with. But the energy, I can think of one instance, and I'm not sure if you remember this. I just gotten, it's my boss now, but he was a newer boss. And it was a couple months in, and I saw a big issue in the org of we were doing too much administration work. And it just been bothering me. And I came up with a plan. I put a little one-pager, met him in person, walked through my proposal, offered to lead the charge on it. At the end of the meeting, he had a glazed look on his face and he said, "Thank you." And I was furious. I think we were coaching maybe a day or two later. So I call you and I tell you the story and I'm still probably fired up. And you're like, "Shari, this is a gift." And I kind of just looked at you. You're like, "This is a gift because this isn't important right now to your boss. He has other problems he's dealing with. And now you don't have to do the work." And you said one or two things will happen. One, he'll realize it. Well, actually, three things. He'll never think it's a problem, or he'll realize it. He'll come back to you, ask you to take charge, or maybe he'll realize it. He'll put someone else on it and you can just consult on it. And I just trusted you on that and I let it go. And fast forward, probably a year later, someone else got put on it. I got to consult. I didn't have to do all the extra work. And it's not completely fixed, but it's moved in the right direction. And I think he remembers that I was one of the first people to bring it up. So I showed some leadership, that back to that strategic, I see things before they happen. But I just didn't stay mad about it. And maybe 10 years ago, I would have carried that with me for God only knows how long.
Yeah. No, I know. And I think that there is this tendency to say, why can't they see? And this ability that, one of your secrets to success that is to really see things from their point of view and to really be able to say, and I think this is the sweet spot with coaching is for me to be able to share with you that perspective that like, oh, sounds like it's not a priority for him, or as opposed to it's a bad idea or it's not something we need to fix. It's just not at the top of his list, right? And that's all. Yeah, that's so good. I appreciate that. I really do love helping my clients with managing their energy as well as managing their conversations and their career and everything all at once. I mean, this is the type of coaching that I do. Any surprises in your career, like when you shifted, whether it's the communication or you said no to something and it turned out better than it could have, or any other things like that come to mind?
Stacy, I would probably say the biggest surprise is, and I'll tie it to what you call the 3X visions, is I went to college. I picked an engineering literally because I wanted a stable career. I wanted to be financially independent. That's kind of a core value of mine as women can be very independent, not just financially, but emotionally. I grew up with a single mom. I know you did too. And it was just really important to me that I just had a good career that I could take care of myself. And the fact that I run over $1 billion organization, that I've gotten to meet, founders of companies. I told you I got to shake Michael Dell's hands 2 weeks ago. I'm in a meeting with 50 people in him. I've traveled the world. I just never envisioned this for myself. So I would just say, I knew I'd be successful, but I just never thought it would look like this. So that's probably been the biggest surprise of my career, is just what I've been able to accomplish, how interesting, how much learning I've done, and how many just wonderful people I've met.
I love that, because it's like we do have the vision, and I know you did for a long time, but then there's always this place of like, am I in this vision? I don't know. I feel that way sometimes. I'm like, I can see it, I can believe it. And then I'm like, but I don't know if I'm in it. And so then to see it start to happen, and maybe in ways that you didn't even imagine at the time, it's like, oh, wow, this is incredible. Wait, I have to pinch myself. What am I doing right now? This is such a big deal. Yeah, I can really appreciate that. That's great. So we alluded to this a little bit, your earlier days in your career and working in a male-dominated environment. I know that part of your fuel and drive for doing more in leadership, for giving back is also to help more women in the pipeline of leadership in your industry, but in all industries. Can you tell us about some of those early impressions that you had in school in Florida and like how your life experience was?
Yeah, I grew up in Florida. I grew up not too far from Kennedy Space Center. And I love science. I love math. And honestly, the reason why I picked engineering is I thought, I could work in the space program. I actually was lucky enough that my mom had two clients that were both electrical engineers that were my mom was able to set up, meetings with them. One of them actually went to Georgia Tech, where I went to school. So I was able to see my mom owned her own business. I was able to see women leaders and women who are independent pretty early on. Not a lot, but I saw a few that kind of put that. But then I think I've told you this story before. When I went to engineering school, that was the first time I really felt like a minority. I was in classes where literally there would be 1 to 4 women out of 30 to 40. Everybody in class knew who you were, and that was kind of uncomfortable. If you asked a stupid question.
That's so true. There is no anonymity, right? Oh my gosh.
All your professors know who you are, even if you don't want them to know who you are. I have a feminine name, so it's pretty obvious who Shari is. So that was the first time I ever felt, like I said, a minority or different. And even when I got out of college, when I would first start doing sales calls, customers would say to me, wow, you really know your stuff. And I'm thinking, why would they say that? But it kept getting repeated. And I think it was because they just literally never saw a female engineer in a meeting who was 25 years old asking good questions and newer stuff. And they were surprised by it. Early on, and as I moved up on in my career, I sometimes found myself being quiet in meetings, which back to I'm a lifelong learner. I like to pay attention. I like to listen. I don't like walking in the room and being center of attention. But I think some of that of me listening and maybe being a little intimidated to say stuff maybe held me back a little bit earlier in my career. I got some feedback from one boss. It's like, you're doing great things and only the people who work with you know that. It didn't dawn on me about that time what a gift that was. And I probably should have been doing more or asked him a question of, well, what do I do now? Instead, I'm like, oh, okay. He said I do a good job, and I moved on it. So
you focus on the good job, right? You're like, well, at least I'm doing well. I'm getting an A+. That's what matters. Not next.
I guess what I should have done was ask the question of, well, what does that mean on it? But instead, I was happy that I got, like you said, I got the A+. Wasn't until I actually took a women's leadership class, and Stacy, you and I both were involved with that, even though we didn't know each other back then, that I realized really the importance of, speaking up in meetings, giving my opinion, of letting people know how I think, what I've been accomplishing, and making sure a lot of different stakeholders, know what I'm doing in the company. And it just took me a long time because I think, like a lot of women, I just thought good work would speak for itself and you would keep getting promoted. And it was when I started realizing, wow, I've reached my career goal and I'm in my mid-30s and I have a lot less to work. What do I want to do next? And this is going to be harder, and you're going to have to tweak some things if you want to get to the next level.
So speaking of to the next level, one of the things that we experienced in coaching was a transition from senior director to vice president. What do you feel like were some big changes that you had to make, either one, to get to that next level, that VP level role? And then now that you're sitting in that VP level role, what are some daily activities that you feel like are either different or perhaps the same now that you're at a more elevated level?
Yeah, so a couple things I did differently was it kind of coincided. My company had just gotten acquired, and this was right before I started working with you. And I didn't know I was doing this at the time, but after working with you I literally within 24 hours of finding out we're going to be acquired, in my head, I decided I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to learn. I'm in an industry that's doing M&As all the time, and I'm not going to be worried if they hate me. I don't have a role. That was huge for me. So that was one thing. I actually also, during that time that the acquisition, because it took about 6 months, hired somebody to get my resume up to date in case it didn't work out. So I went into those meetings with, confidence. The third thing I did was the person who ran all of sales, the first time I met with him, I told him what I wanted. I said I wanted to be like, actually, I told him, I want a role like your role one day.
Good, yes.
And I'd like to be, I'm a senior director. I want to be a vice president. And around that time, Stacy, you and I started working together. And a lot of what I had just kind of intuition told me to do, you helped me refine. You helped me figure out the fact that it's not just going to be one person who makes a decision on that level of a leadership. The whole trust in, you talk about showing people how you think and stuff and really taking time on that, making sure you know what's important to them. And those things are getting done. And, one of the concepts you bring up a lot is not being in the weeds. And I remember questioning you on that. It's like, but I got to know my stuff. You're like, let me explain this to you. There's certain things you need to be on the weeds in, and you need to know it really, really well. There's other things your team can do. And I practice that all the time. And that's probably in my, quote, elevated position now, is I really sometimes struggle with wanting to get down and do the work myself. A, because I like it, but B, I know how to do it. I can probably do it more efficiently than other people. But I step back and go, what are really the important things I should be working on? Who else can do this? By doing this, they can now be elevated and they know more. You're creating all kinds of people who in the org who, know how to do what you do, in case now that gives me an opportunity to move on and get a different position. So I spend a lot of time kind of trying to catch myself, going back to old habits, back to the whole energy thing. When I see myself getting frustrated, I step back and I start asking myself questions of, why are you getting frustrated about this? In the whole big scheme of things, is this really important and stuff? And I think I show up better to meetings, to my team, to our customers, because I do have that mindset.
Yeah. And sometimes I think it's really important to state here, this process is not all about just letting things go. Really, the curiosity place of asking that question, why is this important to me? It might also result in, no, this actually does matter to the organization for this reason. And so then you get much more direct and clearer with your leadership. So it's rooted in the curiosity place, but the solution doesn't always look like, oh, maybe you're just worried about the wrong thing. Maybe you should just let it go. Because I think as women, our intuition is so strong. And you are so decisive, and you do see the problems before other people can see them. So sometimes it's like, oh, well, now let me get clear, because if no one's listening to me, yes, it's not their priority. But if you really do think it should be, how can I communicate this differently so they actually hear me?
Absolutely. And then there's another thing of that energy thing. Something might have happened 10 years ago in a similar situation, and you're still carrying that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, thinking that what's happening now is the exact same thing. And a lot of times it's not. It's you that's seeing that. So just that whole working on how I see things, getting differently has been really good of, I think, just how I show up every day.
Yeah, so good. Now, I actually think that you've been doing this for a very long time, giving back to the community, giving back as a mentor. I don't think it's something new that you've started to do in your career, but that is something that is really important to you. So can you talk about some of the ways that you're able to now transition these learnings into teaching moments for other women in their career? And I know, like, one thing I'm very grateful for is that you're always purchasing my book for people. You're always spreading this podcast, and that's so wonderful, but it's also not a given. Like, a lot of women are not doing this because we're so kind of focused inside and internal. And then, that's why I also said it hasn't been because you've arrived, so to speak. It's like, no, this has actually been part of your process all along. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I can give you an example that's been relatively recent because I've done a couple podcasts and people at the company have seen it on LinkedIn. I'm very involved in our employee resource group, so I post stuff on the internet. I've done panels. So I've had literally in the last 6 months, 3 women in the company who don't work in my group. One's a director level, 2 are at manager level, reach out to me and just say, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time? I like what you're doing in the company, or I listen to this podcast and, can I have 30 minutes of your time? I always make the time. And all three of them work in groups who their VPs and SVPs are my peers that I work with on a very regular basis. I know what makes them tick. I know what's important to them. And one in particular, she had an initiative that she wanted to get kind of support from her SVP. So this was 3 levels above her. And her going into it, she calls me, we're going through, she's like, I really want to sell him on this. And I'm like, you actually don't need to sell him on this. I know for a fact this is something that's super important to him. So I would focus your presentation and discussion with him on showing him a few things you've already done in the success and where you need his support, and ask for, like, if you need money, if you need time, if you need resources, ask for it all, because you don't need to sell him. And lo and behold, she met with him. It went really well. He's given her some support on some things. So it's something small, but her meeting still would have been good. But the fact of the matter, I know this person well. I have a seat at the table with them, and I was able to guide somebody in the organization to maybe not to have 5 meetings with this person, but in one meeting could get what they want, was something that made me feel really good. And the other 2 women was very similar type of stories of just because I know them, I'm like, well, I'd maybe tweak it a little.
Oh, that's so brilliant. Now, I know this is kind of similar, like we can infer a little bit about why you personally feel motivated to have that voice at the table, but anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Well, it's back to, I told you, one of my core values and one of my drivers in life was to be this independent woman. And I really want women to not just be surviving. I want them to have lives, not just careers that are thriving. And then secondly, we talked about it earlier, I'm in an extremely male-dominated industry, and it's been very hard. And there's certainly a lot of women that came before me, but I think we just kind of brute forced our way through it. Now there are just so much content out there. I mean, 20 years ago, there weren't women's leadership classes and courses, or maybe 25, but I mean, it's a relatively new things, lean in. I mean, all these different things. No one was talking about all this. So it's really important to me I think you need to see it to be it. And that's, I think, why I do these things that I do. A, they give me a lot of joy, but B, I just want to make it a little bit easier for everybody else.
You are, Shari, you are. It's so incredible. And me too. Like I said, this is always so reciprocal, celebrating you and motivates me and so on and so on. So as we close out today, this has been such a powerful interview. Any final words of wisdom for that woman in her career who's struggling, feeling stuck, nobody's listening to her, she doesn't know what to do next?
I would say there's 3 things. 1 would be to think big, 2, get support, and then 3, be your authentic self. And back to that, thinking big, Stacy, one thing, buy Stacy's book, Promotions Me. No, seriously. And I don't get any endorsement from this. I read it on a plane to the East Coast. I live in California. So, I mean, I got through it in five hours. I'm not a big reader of self-help books or anything. It was just so simple to do. So whether it's buying your book, buying someone else's book, get that support. But I love your concept of 3X vision, of thinking 3X, 10X. Where do you want to be 3 jobs from now, 10 jobs from now? And no matter how ridiculous it is, write it down and say it out loud. I think that's so important to do, to kind of get unstuck. And then start doing things that support that vision on it. And then lastly, I think as women, we're told that we have to be nice or we have to be this way. Be your authentic self. When you're not that authentic self, people can tell. And I think sometimes that holds people back in their career. And once you start showing up as you, might not be at the company you're at, but you're going to find a company that like you fit in and they love your voice, they love your ideas and stuff. And that's been one of the biggest changes I've made, is just I continue to show up as me, and whether people like me or not, that's not important.
Yeah, this is so huge. And I love what you said about the 3X vision is like, we can create the vision and then we can start to take steps towards it. And the concept of stuckness is always rooted in like right now. right? Like typically we're not thinking, oh, I'm stuck to get to my 3X vision. We're like stuck with the bad boss or the difficult situation or the, right, like being in the same company for too long and whatever that might be. And so I really appreciate this, taking any sort of steps towards that bigger vision helps create that momentum and move forward so that we're not just like waiting to see what the next job is.
Exactly. And, Stacy, I, like a lot of women, like to do everything perfect and it's got to be done super fast and everything. It's okay to set small goals for yourself. Like you said, that momentum of, I'm going to spend 30 minutes a week on this. It doesn't have to be this big, lofty thing, and will move you in the direction. So that's been helpful for me.
Thank you so much, Shari, for being here. I really appreciate it. Shari Begun, everyone. How can they connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Shari Begun.
All right. Definitely reach out and share this podcast episode with anybody that you think could benefit from it. Shari, thank you again for your time and take care.
Thank you.
Before you go, I have a question for you. Do you know how close you are to your next promotion? Really? Not what your boss has told you, not what you even believe to be true, but have you actually taken the time to sit down, take an assessment, review the 5 categories that it takes to get promoted into senior executive leadership positions and decided where you fall in each category and given yourself a ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 of how close you are to getting your next promotion? Have you done this? Well, now's your chance. If that feels interesting to you and you're like, hey, I want to know exactly how close I might actually be or how far away you might be and what it's going to take to get you even closer, then I invite you to take my promotability quiz. This is a quiz that I put together with practical tips that actually tell you where you're lacking and where you're winning. What are the areas that you actually need to improve and not necessarily what your boss is telling you all the time so that you can take concrete steps towards landing that next promotion and changing the face of the leadership table. Go to yourpromotabilityscore.com to take your free assessment today. Yourpromotabilityscore.com and let me know how it goes.